Can I ask if one of you guys already know about anything about the GDPR? Are you within the IT scope or the compliance one? A little bit. No? So the GDPR. Well, perhaps I can introduce myself. As you have may understood, I'm not native English guy. I just moved over recently. I'm from Portugal, and the main reason why I moved over is because of the weather. I don't like the good old Portuguese weather, so I just decided that it should be a great time for me to come to London. But I work for the Virtual Forge. We are a global IT company that, at the end of the day, what we do is deliver solutions that build businesses, and we accomplish this by being very expert in software development, UX, cloud services, data intelligence. That basically pose a big part of the role for the GDPR, but also cybersecurity, which is the area of compliance that we tend to focus about. So rather than being a lawyer and being on the legal side of the business, that, well, let's be honest, I don't know, delve into your pockets and steal a lot of your money for, but I'm joking. But we understand the scope and we monitor and adapt the tech side of the business to the legal requirements. So we are based again in UK, Bath in London, Dubai, Lisbon, and North America, Pennsylvania. So what is the GDPR? Well, basically the GDPR is the new data protection regulation that at the end of the day intends to bring into the conversation two major topics. One is to prevent your data to be leaked. So companies now more than ever need to be aware that they need to have a proper cyber security in place. And more important than have a very good compliance level and assure that you have that ticket box that allows you to provide consent, you still need to have a very good cybersecurity. But because at the end of the day, if you have a very good cybersecurity in place, ensuring that you are understanding what needs to be resilient, is your infrastructure strong enough, are you mandating the requirements of some policy like ISO, for instance, I'm sure that you are ensuring that you are compliant, whereas in the other way around, if you are only trying to understand the policies and procedures, you might fail to be compliant. Again, it's all about data, avoiding the data to be leaked, and also bring over the rights of the subjects. Assure that you have control over your personal data that organizations have. A very good question that normally people tend to ask is, so how do I know that my organization is actually within the scope? Well, it's very easy. Do you monitor data? Do you store data? Do you somehow transfer data to one of your partners? Well, if you do, you are under the requirements and you need to be compliant. And if you are not compliant, I can assure you some heavy and big penalties you can face very heavy and big penalties. And so until this day, people in organizations try to overcome this as the regulation was not defended and supported by law. So right now is supported by law. There's a law that says, I recognize the GDPR, whereas in the past, you would only have a directive. And again, it's very easy to overcome if you have a right legal department that helps you with that, right? So now we need to have very much attention to this. So again, what is processing by definition? Organizing, retrieving data, adaptation, using information data. Well, anything around data usage is within the scope. Anything. If you are storing data, if you have but you can say, well, Mark, but I don't actually store my data. I have a partner that does that for me. We are cloud services. Cloud company service that actually stores the data for us. It doesn't matter. You are the company. The company is actually mandated by you in terms of the way they should be using the data. So again, you are under the requirements. There's no way you can or find a way to overlaps the need to be and to be compliant with the standards. And there are 7 principles. I'm sure that you can find very difficult to understand. Basically, they are not. What these principles tend to do and underpin is the requirements, and it's all about minimizing whatever you need to have in place, as in a way as in what you are doing with the data you are storing, and to keep the reasons why you stored in the first place. So there's no longer the chance of you to go out there, ask the data of your customers, and then use it for other purposes. If you want to do that now, you still need to ask for consent. I'm not sure if you guys already have been approached by some companies that have your data stored, but some of them are now asking again for consent on their policies because the policies changed, and now they need to assure that you understand the changes and that you allow them to use your data for these changes. If you don't do that, you are not being compliant, and you can face, again, very heavy penalties. Again, as I mentioned, minimize, be accurate, be transparent. It's all about transparency. It's all about keeping everything accurate, all right? So, not a very difficult thing to do. And underneath the principles, there's the rights of the data subjects, because at the end of the day, it's all about being fair to your customers and assure that they understand their rights, and they now are able to object or restrict at some point the use of the data that you are doing for. And if you don't, again, I'm not trying to be annoying. I'm not trying to be like a lawyer or anything, but it can be something very heavy and very easy to prevent as well. So, well, the impacts already went through the impacts, which can be administrative, so 4% of your global turnover or 20 million on your revenues. Oh, I'm sorry, 40% of the global turnover or 20 million, whichever is greater. All right. So, well, I'm not saying that every company is affected by this. There are some amendments to the contract, amendments to the regulation that can be put in place, but especially if you are a small company. But medium to large companies tend to be affected by these fines. But also, and this is something new, it's no longer the fines that can be posed by the European Commission. It's me as a client, it's me as an end user. If I find that the use that you are making of my data is not the right one, I now have the right to go to a legal court, say that I'm not happy with what's happening, say that you are not respecting my rights, and there's not a limit to what the court can impose as a fine. As they well, if I feel that psychologically I've been affected, well, it will most definitely be. Well, there's a peer of mine, a Portuguese peer of mine, just seated in the front. I just realized Teresa is seated in the front. So if I feel that my rights are being violated, I can now start a legal process against your organization, aside from the administrative fines that you already have to face. And with this comes a new role. Well, not a new role, but a new mandatory role, which basically helps the organization to maintain the compliance levels. Because more important, or as important as to have the policies and the security in place as the date is looming over, is the need for you to maintain these levels of compliance. And the data protection officer helps the controller, that can be your CEO, that can be your CTO, maintain these compliance levels in place. And a simple audit that takes 1 month can assure that your organization will not face any sort of damage. Well, that can either be financial damages, brand damages, but also at the end of the day, it's financial and brand damages. But so and you're not to lose business as well. within the market that you are in. And you can still be a very good upgrade to your competitors if you already have this in place. I'm not sure if you remember, but in the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that more important than to assure that you have the policies in place is to assure that your security is in place. Because if you assure this part, if you have the data encrypted, if you on go with security measures constantly, regular security testing, well, everything around cyber, I would say that you are 90% there. Most of the companies only need to make some amendments to the policies, whereas most of them still don't have a great policy in place. I'm not sure, well, most of you still recall the problem that happened in NHS with the data leakage that happened. Well, it happened with a lot of companies. And the reason that happened, it was a very stupid procedure and management that happened back then. They only needed to upgrade the systems that they had, and Microsoft had alerted them for that. 1 month later, Patia happened, and Patia was a replication of WannaCry. And we are talking about very big companies that only needed to assure that the standards were in place. Well, again, I wasn't prepared to do this presentation because our CTO is booked. This is mainly a sales pitch, but we actually, and the normal one, I normally delve into deeply on the GDPR side, but this is the pitch that we present to companies to explain how can we help. So we actually can help achieve the levels of compliance by very easy steps to follow, and we normally advise. So first one, be aware. Assure that your stakeholders are aware of what's happening out there, out there, and to assure that they are not exposing the company to the risks that are lurking. Second one, assure that you know the information you hold. Where does it come from? Where is it stored? What is the usage that you are doing with it? All right? It's again, very easy, not very difficult to implement, but very important. Privacy information, make sure that you constantly review these notices. Again, not very easy to do. Individuals' rights, something very new that now this regulation is underpinning is the rights of the subject. So something that we must assure that is being abided. Then it comes the subject access request, which is basically the same. Lawful basis for processing PII. Remember the consent part? Well, assure that you are processing the personal identifiable information, that is any sort of information that enables me as a company to identify you as individual. Assure that you are abiding the reason why you stored the data in the first place for, all right? Well, then comes consent, children consent. This is a very gray area because it's very difficult to control if a children is actually if you are actually being able to provide access to the children. So this is a part that in some cases the guardian or the parent consent comes into the table, and have this sort of consent is very important to proceed forward. Data breaches. Well, but you can say, well, Marco, that's a very fair point, saying that if I assure that I have a proper security in place, there's a very good chance that I'm being compliant. But what happens if I'm breached anyway? I can have a very good hacker enter into my infrastructure. Well, that is true, but you know what? You still have to have a procedure in place to detect that a breach had happened, and what is your procedure and proceedment to take this onwards. And it comes everything that we've mentioned about as well. The international part. I'm not sure if do you guys in the audience, do you have data stored in the US? Do you use cloud services that are based in the US? So you do. So at the moment, what we are advising to companies to pursue is try to avoid that. Well, at least until the US embraces the GDPR. Although they have a policy that is very similar to ours, Privacy Shield, if I'm not wrong, there are still some twists to that, and not to know if your provider is compliant is a risk at this moment. Well, at least in the early stages, we are advising people to maintain a sub service within the EU market scope, all right? So this is how can we help you. So again, as I mentioned, I'm sorry, this wasn't supposed to be a GDPR speech and a sales speech, but we actually can help by designing a roadmap to success. We basically make a pre-scope of your compliance levels. This has any sort of commitment attached whatsoever. We basically understand what are the path to follow, and if you are missing and having some misconception over the regulation and what needs to be implemented, then it comes the design where we basically help you have the governance in place and the implementation part. Again, I'm sorry it wasn't supposed to be a sales pitch, but for you to have an understanding, these are the procedures that we advise companies to follow to achieve the compliance levels. And why are we different? Again, as I mentioned, we don't want to get into your pockets. We are a tech company, not a legal one, so we understand the tech procedures, we adapt to the policies in place, and we accompany you throughout the process, whereas an IT company that understands the business, it would be most helpful to have for. And some of the customers that we work with, and well, get in touch, and if you have any question, feel free to ask. Thank you.